Oh, of course. Figures it would be me with the distraction. All right.
All right, we are good to go.
We are good to go. All right. First, the Ethics Act statement. It is the duty of committee members to avoid conflicts of interest and appearance of conflicts of interest in performing the duties as a member of the Communications Committee in the North Carolina State Bar. Any member of the committee who is aware of any personal conflicts or appearances thereof with respect to the matters before this committee should disclose those at the meeting. Does anyone have any conflicts that they need to disclose? We can go like this, right? Nobody? Okay, perfect. Now I'm really going to turn my phone off. Okay, so since this is the Communications Committee, I wanted to first communicate a couple of things. First of all, and I think most importantly, I hope that all of you and your family and your friends and your loved ones and your coworkers and everybody are healthy, and I guess both physically and mentally. I know that these are challenging times, and we've heard that word and that description over and over and over again, and that everyone is doing their part to stay healthy and keep others healthy. I saw a post today on Facebook, because of course that's where I get all of my important news and alerts. And it basically said that the first 5 emojis on your phone describe how you're handling the pandemic. And I know all you guys are going to look right now, because that's exactly what I did. And the first one for me was, you know, the orange face guy that's really angry with the sort of expletives across his face. That was the first one. The second one was the lady banging her head on the desk. The third one was a party hat, because everyone in my family has birthdays. And then we won't mention the others, but it was just a good representation of just what we've all been dealing with. So to my second point, I'm very happy to see all of you. I'm sad that it's not in person, really sad. The July meeting, I think, is our favorite for many. And I regret that we didn't get together in April, but it is good to see you. And I'm thank you for being here even virtually. So the third thing, as you heard Peter say at the beginning, is this meeting is being live streamed, and I'm sure has a zealous following. So be mindful. I had earlier this week a Zoom call with a guy who picked up his coffee cup, and the cup had on a, we'll call it a strong political statement. And then yesterday, my favorite, I was talking with a lady, and her very naked 3-year-old was running around behind her. So considering this is live streamed, I thought you all should know that. And hopefully Peter can remind us about what that looks like, where it will be, and what all's going on later in the agenda. The first thing, I hope everybody got their packet that Brian sent out earlier this week. At the front of the packet was the minutes from, believe it or not, our January meeting, since we didn't get to meet in April. So I'm hopeful that everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes. And if you did, does anyone have any changes or corrections that you believe need to be made to the minutes? We can just go like this. No, thumbs down. Okay. That being the case, is there a motion with respect to the minutes? Catherine is moving to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I would second that motion for approval.
Thank you. All right. The motion is seconded and passes. All right. In your agenda, the first thing we wanted to talk about was sort of the first and second quarter recap. And I was looking back at my notes from the conversation Peter and Brian and I had in January about sort of goals for the committee and what I hoped we would accomplish and be able to do. You may recall in January, we had a really lively conversation about sort of my hope to, I guess, more humanize the State Bar and show our stakeholders who and what we are. And wow, has a lot changed since that meeting. And correspondingly, of course, so have some of our objectives and goals and our purposes. So Peter, first, since we already touched on it, can you tell us a little bit about what has been going on and how the meetings are being broadcast?
Yeah, so out of this craziness, I think it's pretty clear, as Heidi said, that January was BC, and things have changed for us here. And so, but one of the actual good things that has come out of this is our use of remote technology for these video conferencing for these meetings. We've been able to, and are live streaming every single meeting of the bar this quarter that is not a closed meeting. So every single meeting other than grievance and distinguished service and the Client Security Fund Board is being live streamed, which is really phenomenal. So it'll be the first time for people who are not in the building to see an ethics committee meeting, to see this morning. That would be the first time they've gotten to see an authorized practice committee meeting live streamed. So I think it's really nice. And what we have been doing is we're streaming them to our YouTube page. So this is the first quarter that we've moved from Facebook to YouTube. I actually really prefer it. It doesn't lead to people. We often get calls or emails saying, how do I get to this? I don't have Facebook. How do I watch you? I don't have Facebook. We try to explain that you didn't need to have Facebook account to get to our page, but it didn't always go through clear to individuals. And having it on a separate and distinct YouTube page that is easily accessible with the links that we pre-scheduled and laid out on our website has been really nice. We've had some meetings where we've had 10 to 20 people at a time actually logged in and watching. Some of the lesser known and less popular meetings have one or two, but anyone can then, after the meeting, go in and immediately watch the full meeting. It's all available there. For most of our meetings, we've had this is actually live. This is what's happening now, a little bit tape delayed on YouTube. I think it's 10 to 20 seconds delayed. So I'll hold up my hand now, and then you'll be able to see when that hand pops up. But we've been able to share the agendas and those types of things in the comments and in the details of the meeting, so people can really track and see what's going on. I think this part is just been really nice, and we won't be able to do this going forward. When we get back live, it's going to be harder to live stream all of the meetings again. But at least for this period, it's been a blessing to be able to do that. Something good has come out of this whole thing, is to be able to share all of this with anyone who wants to be watching.
So Peter, for those of us who are maybe not as technologically gifted, or not Catherine's mom who can find anything, how do we find the YouTube channel? Do you just Google State Bar, or?
You could Google NC State Bar YouTube, but we also have on our website where we normally have the meeting schedule, we have the YouTube links to each scheduled meeting. Unfortunately, we don't have enough subscribers to have our own custom URL, so we can't do something that says youtube.com/NC State Bar. You have to have 100 subscribers or something to be able to do that, or more. So if we get to that, then we can have our own custom web address for the YouTube page. But on our website, all of these are hyperlinks that you can click. And Brian, if you just click one that's already happened, even, and it'll take you and show you the video of it. Perfect.
Peter, can't you if you send out information, I think all the counselors would subscribe, and I mean, we could get up to 100, I think.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Barbara. I think maybe we'll try to get everyone to subscribe to our YouTube page. I'll check and see what the number is that's required to get us to be able to have a custom page.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you, because I'm positive between counselors, firms,
right,
parents,
yeah,
that we could that's for you, that we could hopefully come up with enough, assuming it's not some, Taylor Swift-esque kind of number, 100,000.
I think if I remember correctly, I think it was 100 subscribers,
We
something
can do that.
fairly.
Okay.
Right
All
now
right,
we're at 9, I think, 9 subscribers.
Okay. Well, if you guys could figure out what the number is and let us know, I think it would certainly be easier if we could have our own URL. All right. But still, cool development and silver linings, I guess.
Can I just throw something out there?
Dorothy?
Dorothy.
I just want to throw out there just my little mishap that I had in our earlier meeting this morning, where I was booted out and then I was trying to get back in. And while I was waiting to get back in or waiting to get on initially too, I got on the YouTube page and was able to keep watching the meeting. And so that was very helpful for me to be able to, because I could swiftly get on that YouTube page and watch it. So it was helpful for me in that way. I just wanted to throw that.
Great. I saw that you were a new subscriber, Dorothy. I was happy to have you.
So how long, Peter, does the YouTube streams of a meeting stay on or available on YouTube? Because I know like Ashley wanted to watch it. How long does it remain available?
It'll be there in perpetuity until we ever take it down. So that as soon as the meeting's over, it will become, it'll upload itself and you'll be able to watch it and pause it, rewind it, however you want to do it. And it'll stay up there on our page as a video that you can watch. Okay,
that's very cool.
Which has been helpful for things like what we'll talk about later with the ethics committee meetings, like to be able to send it out to people. Hey, we just had this. Take a, if you missed it, you can go and watch it and learn what we were talking about.
Okay. All right. Goal is to get 100 subscribers, right? Okay. Podcast. You all might remember in January, again, aspirationally, BC, we had talked about putting together a series of podcasts ranging from whether it was just a focus on a counselor or an ethics question or how the state bar works. Again, part of the goal of humanizing. We did manage to have one podcast. Is that right, Brian?
Yes, we had one podcast. It's so I'm trying to find it actually right now so I can show you since I've got this pulled up. We actually got subscribed to Apple's system or their podcast ecosystem, and I'm going to share my screen here to see if you all can see what I'm seeing, and it is this right here. Bar Talk, NC State Bar. If you just type in NC State Bar if you have an Apple iPhone, you can go into their podcast library and you will find the State Bar's podcast. We also uploaded to SoundCloud, which is another podcast service. And ultimately, we, Peter and I basically put together a podcast talking about the activities of the quarterly meeting during the January meeting. We have not since put together another podcast because of everything that's been going on. And frankly, we've just not been in the same room where we can hook up 2 microphones to actually record something. But nevertheless, we've had some folks that actually listen to it. And I'm going to see if you'll see these materials in your agenda. But these are our stats. We had 43 people actually listen to our podcast through Apple's platform. I don't know who those 43 people were. I know I only listened to it like 41 times. So at least 2 more people listened to it. No, I'm kidding about that. But yeah, I'm curious who was listening to it. But nevertheless, we did put this podcast out there. It was, fairly, I guess I would say fairly easy to put together, and interesting. And it was just a chance for us to talk about just what happened at the bar in a more informal way. And hopefully people will find that helpful for keeping up with bar activities.
I think.
Able to do any?
Go ahead, Heidi.
Oh, I was asking Mark, who had actually just unmuted himself anyway, if he had been able to produce any podcasts.
I have. I think I've done 5 since COVID. So, and I've done them remotely. I was going to say it's actually not that hard to record it. It feels almost like a Zoom call. So you can look at the other guests and record it, and then publish it in podcast format. So, and I thought your podcast was great. I'm one of the 43 listeners, but I thought it was entertaining and, approachable. And I think it's a good idea. And actually, in some ways, it's easier to do it in this virtual context because you don't have to worry about getting everybody together. You kind of schedule it and record it. Now, what I don't handle is the technical piece of taking it from recording the conference here to actually then putting it into whatever that WAV file or whatever it is that they use for SoundCloud. So I've got somebody doing the production piece for me. But yeah, I thought it was good. We did several on how folks in-house counsel are adapting to COVID. So I thought some were good. I actually had a guest who is the CEO of the Johns Hopkins Center for Public Safety talking about where COVID's going and testing and stuff. And I got 500 listens on that. She's fairly well known, and Johns Hopkins is a real source of info. So I think you can continue even non face-to-face.
So maybe you could send us the link for the one you just mentioned. But also, so what are y'all's thoughts on, obviously there's so much going on in the world, in the state, in our country these days that obviously takes priority over a lot of some of the things we do. But what are your thoughts on still attempting maybe a few podcasts? I think it's a little random and weird to have one and then go dark, but obviously we've been focused on a lot of other things. We had preliminarily talked about a sort of a subcommittee that was Diane, Mark, Ashley, and then Brian and Peter. And obviously that never really got off the ground, but I would be supportive of trying maybe just a few, if Mark would be willing to sort of give us some guidance on that. So Adam, who is remotely, said it would be a good time to put out podcasts.
Yeah, and I was going to say Andrea has her hand raised as well.
Yep. What do you think, Andrea?
So one of the things that came to mind, and I can just as a test, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is maybe overlapping a little bit with some of the topics that we've been discussing in publications, such as implicit bias and things like that are topics that, and COVID, of course, that are topics that people are interested in now. And I'm wondering if some of the names that have been thrown around in the publications committee as being possible resources for articles could also be considered for interviews. And just, I don't know how much preparation that would take, and anybody, if Brian or Peter is willing to do that. But I think interviews on hot topics could draw some attention, just like Mark was talking about with the COVID, the woman from Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, and at our publications meeting, we had a pretty robust discussion about some interesting folks that we were considering for articles, but that are just generally interesting and informed on various topics. I know there's probably some concern from Brian and Peter that they have a lot on their plate. Would it have to be produced by them, or do we think someone else could interview and or handle the production?
I think the idea, Andrea's idea, is a good one for using journal articles as a source for people to interview. You can always base it around the article or preview the article and use that as the reference point to have an interview about, more in-depth discussion from the person who wrote this article or is writing an article for the journal. I think that's a really good idea. I don't know, in terms of the production stuff, I think it could be someone else. I think Brian and I could probably squeeze these things in after the July meeting. We have some, August is, we'll just be working on some of these special ethics projects and rules projects and database stuff. But I think we can probably do some more podcasts while we're home. I think Catherine Fry's idea about interviewing the president-elect and the other ideas that Mark sent many months ago, there were some really good topics and good ideas. I think all of these are good ideas. And maybe if we want to do more, we need to bring in others to help with the interviews. But if we want to do 2 or 3 podcasts in this quarter, then I think Brian and I can probably do that. Alice has her hands up. Okay.
Mark, you were saying something?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to follow up with whether we want to put energy into this kind of thing, but we could think about lining up podcast topics similarly to the way we line up publication topics, where we spend time just brainstorming on what topics we want. We get it approved by the committee, and then we just focus on, lining up the interviews.
And I think that had sort of been the intent with the formation of the subcommittee in the beginning, and they put out, I thought, a pretty good preliminary list of ideas, and then COVID hit.
Right.
So I would be up for recirculating that list. I think you sent it, right, Mark?
I think so.
Okay.
I have to find it too. It feels like it forever ago.
It does.
But no, and I really like the idea of tying it into articles. In fact, that's something we started to do with our podcast. We'll do a podcast and then we do an article on the same topic, and it gets good synergy because you can cross-reference one and the other. So I think that's smart. And I'm happy to help volunteer as a host, co-host, whatever. I mean, I think I don't mind doing it, and I can devote a few hours to doing it since I've done 100 podcasts now.
Yeah, your learning curve is a lot less steep than ours.
Happy to do it. So
Yeah.
I enjoy it, and I enjoy it. It's fun. So
Barbara and Alice with their hands up. Barbara?
I just wanted to add to your list, I don't know what'll happen about the October meeting, the 50-year lawyer luncheon, but it might be nice if we included, if whether we have it or not, maybe an interview with a 50-year lawyer. They have some great stories, and so I'll just toss that out.
Good idea.
I like that.
Alice?
I'll follow up on that. That wasn't my idea, but I think that's an excellent one. And, we're going ahead with asking the 50-year lawyers to send us their little bios that would normally be in the program at the luncheon. We're going to go ahead and get those and somehow publicize them. But part of my job is to edit them. So I could pick out maybe, 5 or 10 of the people. My grandson is here.
As long as he has his clothes on.
Sorry. But I could pick out 5 or 10 of them that are really good, and we could possibly use that as a podcast. I wanted to also suggest a podcast based on some articles that we have coming out, and an article that came out in the last edition of the Journal, and that is Judge Ashley Parker Dunstan did an article in the last Journal that was on sexist comments that women lawyers have experienced while they were in court and in different practice settings. And now she's doing an article that's about Black lawyers having similar experiences. And then Robin Morades has also written an article based on her experience with the Minority Outreach Conference. Maybe we can pair the two of them and have an hour-long session about what their experiences are. I'm volunteering Robin, who is out on medical leave right now. So this would be something that when she got back, but I actually think both women would really embrace that idea. So that's what I wanted to throw out there. Excuse me, my grandson was visiting. I didn't know he was going to come at that moment.
Bobby also just put up an idea that I think is a really good one about a series on some of the Distinguished Service Award recipients. It's easy to highlight those folks, and I think that their service to our profession and to the state sort of is worthy of being publicized. I really like that idea. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on this, Barbara. Maybe you can tell me. Who is chairing the DSA?
Charles Hardy.
Okay, all right. What are your thoughts on the sort of some features on prior DSA recipients?
I think it's a good idea as well. I mean, I think we've got some really good ideas. I'm practically speaking, I don't think we can do 15 podcasts the rest of 2020. So we'll have to prioritize and pick some winners. But I think those are all really viable ideas.
Because I'm a
I will say,
podcast neophyte, how difficult and how long or much time does the production of a podcast actually take? Because I have no idea.
Well, Brian and I recorded it in 2 sittings. Then we had to go through and edit out all of the curse words and terrible things we said.
Nonsense.
And the mistakes and all the times we had to start over or restart. But I think it probably took a day to edit after a few hours of recording. It's not terrible. It's not terribly difficult. It just has to. Editing is one of those things that you have to turn everything else off and focus and get it done. And there's always these other distractions that pop up. But if we prioritize it in the next couple of months, we can do a few for sure.
Okay.
So
Mark?
you did it yourselves, so you didn't have somebody else do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess
We
my
are the other person.
my thought is that's pretty high value time to have you guys spending a day editing a podcast. I don't know. I mean, it's probably an Alice question, but in terms of resources, I mean, I don't edit. I don't edit them. I let somebody else do that. So for me, it's mainly the prep time and then just the recording time, and then I'm, my piece is done. So there are obviously outside firms that can do it. I think some of the markup, kind of the stuff as you record more gets, you need to do less of that. I mean, we've had some that we've done in one take, but you still, at least for us, and the sound guys have to modulate the volumes. They have to add intro and outtakes if you want the nice little music to make it sound like a, professional podcast. So, but that stuff can be, outsourced. I don't remember what our pricing is. It may be close to $1,000 an episode, I think, to get it done. So that may not be a good budget option, but that does seem like a lot of time for 2 of our,
Right.
key
What about
talents at the
Jennifer?
bar.
Could you edit? Jennifer Duncan, not Elsa.
I'm game to try. I've never attempted it, but sure. I was thinking the same thing as we're sitting having this discussion. I was like, I could take a crack at it.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter and Brian, I'm assuming, are self-taught podcast editors. So.
Okay.
Right. Heidi, I think Tom had his hand up first. Tom Englund, do you still have a comment?
Yeah.
Well, I was just I put it in my chat that the DSA committee, when we met, kind of talked about figuring out how to recognize the recipients in such a way, and then to broadcast it in such a way. And we had a good discussion about that. Dorothy mentioned some ideas as well in that discussion. So I think if that's what you're going to do, I think it's just something we need to work hand in hand with the DSA committee and to figure out how that recipient wants to be acknowledged.
I wondered
Some
what
of
we
them
were
may
going to
not
be
want anything to
doing
do with it.
about those upcoming presentations, seeing as how most of them are probably not happening live right now. I'll reach out to Charles and Tom and Dorothy. Maybe you all can share with me at some point, what you discussed, because we should find a way to publicize that. All right.
Andrea,
My final,
Yeah, I had I guess I had a thought about logistics, but it sounds like we have these wonderful topics that would all be great for podcasts. And as Peter and Brian mentioned, there's not enough time to do it all. So from a practical standpoint, are we going to leave it up to Peter and Brian on which ones they want to focus on? Or are we as a committee Or should we, as a committee, look at all the topics and prioritize which ones we want them to focus on?
Good question. I think, Mark, as you sort of technically head the subcommittee, do you have a preference or, yeah, I forgot to tell you that.
I do. Thank you. Thank you. It's a great honor. So I have not re-reviewed the topic list. I guess listening though, I had two thoughts. One is I think the DSA is a great idea, and I think those could be fairly short podcasts. In other words, that doesn't have to be a half hour long. I think you're going to get more interest in listenership if it's a short 10 or 15 minute conversation with the award winner about their history and stuff. And then they can share it with family and other people, and you can put it in the channel. I think that, and with their law firms and whatnot. And I think if it's short, it's interesting. When I was looking broadly at podcast statistics, when we were trying to analyze length, a lot of the short podcasts get much higher listenership. People feel fine committing to a 10, even a 20-minute podcast. And despite that, mine are often, 40 or 50 minutes long, but I'm over the ideal length for maximum listenership. And I think the DSA ones in particular, I think could be short and punchy and could be great. My only thought on topic is tying in with an article where we've got someone we're working on that's published something. So you kind of have a way to cross promote, and you kind of have that topic already developed is a great idea, but I wasn't in the publication committee meeting, so I don't know what looks like the most promising, but I might go with what you want to publish, and then we could try to tie in a podcast with it. I think it's a good idea.
Well, I mean, I think in view of Colin's very well written message from the state bar regarding some of the racial and civil unrest and the implicit bias articles that we talked about, Andrea, that I wonder if that's a logical, interesting, timely topic. But because I don't completely understand what the best way to market or present these things are, would you think it's better for the article to come out first or the podcast?
Good question. I don't know. Jennifer, do you have a thought about that?
I guess my thought would be if the journal comes out first, then you can reference it in the podcast. I guess it depends on, do you want to drive people from the podcast to the article or from the article to the podcast?
I think the podcast to the article.
Yeah. So then
as you say that, I'm thinking
first.
Yeah.
Then you'd have the podcast and then say,
Mm-hmm.
Read Judge, Ashley Dunstan's article about, race in the legal profession in the fall 2020 journal.
Right. So if Mark's committee could just go ahead and look at the last journal that was published, which was fairly recently, maybe just go through the articles and see which ones you think might be interesting for podcasts. That might be one way to approach it.
Or Mark, I can send you the list of the articles that will be coming out the beginning of September. So then that's something where we could shoot for a podcast to film, sometime after this meeting. And then, the digital version comes out probably 2 weeks prior to that. And so if we're driving people from the podcast, we can just have a link to the online journal. That should be out, the middle of August.
And then can we market this through our Twitter account and Facebook?
Yeah. Yeah. If I could just jump in, I think this ties in well to something that's later in our for our third quarter plan in terms of outreach and regarding ethics proposals, especially if we were to do a podcast about implicit bias or those sorts of things, tying it into an update on what the ethics committee did in July with the proposals for the preamble or studying any new rule changes and what the CLE board is doing. I think that would all be a pretty good tie-in podcast where we could have an interview with an author who wrote about this and also give an update on what the state bar has been doing over the past few months to look at these issues.
So what I'll do is work with Mark, I think, on taking the list that he sent us originally, plugging in some of these additional things. Jennifer, you'll send the link of the articles that are coming up for the next issue of the journal. And then Mark, maybe we can pick one to tackle. Because I think we should try to put
I like
something
it.
out in the next month if we could, Peter.
Okay. Dorothy has a hand up.
This is multitasking. This is hard between the chats and the hands. And so I'm sorry if I didn't see it.
Oh, you're fine. I totally get it. I just wanted to suggest, Peter, for the podcast that you just mentioned, speaking about the updates that the CLE is looking to do and all of that, the CLE board is doing, to consider having James Williams participate in that, because that like history and overview that he did in that presentation that he gave is phenomenal. And I just don't know that people just know that. And I think that would be a good piece to have on that podcast.
That's a good idea, Dorothy.
All right. Well, I feel good about having hopefully done something productive and having some goals going forward with some very timely topics and content. All right, next on the agenda, and you will find in your packet, unless anyone has anything else that I haven't seen, a comment or a hand or anything else they want to say as far as podcasts, are we good to move on from that? Yep. Okay. In your materials is the annual report that Brian and Peter put together. And Brian, can you
mostly Jennifer put this one together mostly. Yeah.
This is all Jennifer Duncan this year. So, and it looks phenomenal. So it's in your materials. There was just kind of a slight update that we've since made to some of the financial numbers now that we have the audited numbers back. But nevertheless, the annual report is prepared. It's ready for publication. Kind of following the same general format that we've used in years past, but I think it's a really good product. So I think the intention is to, unless there's any objection, to publish it on our website. We have not published it yet. We typically try to publish these things during Sunshine Week, which occurs in March. It's the week that's highlighted for government transparency. But of course, we did not publish it this year because we were hit with COVID. And I think Sunshine Week really did not occur or take the same sort of position that it typically does in years past. So all that being said,
it was rained out. Let's just say.
Yeah, it was rained out. That's a good way of putting it. It was rained. We had a rain out. So the annual report is there in your materials for your information and dissemination. But of course, we're going to publish it as its own single file on the website, and we can put it on EDDS as well. So you have an easy spot to just simply download the annual report as it stands.
Thank you for putting that together, Jennifer. It looks really good. All right. As far as sort of the highlights of things that we have communicated about in the first and second quarter, Peter, can you tell us about what you think we've done well?
So I think one of our goals in January was to improve our communications and increase, humanizing the bar. But we really turned in once the pandemic hit and the shutdowns happened. Our focus was to be a method of communication for the court system and the government, and I think that was something we did well and continue to do well. Sharon Gladwell was on this. I think she's still here. Sharon has worked with us to help get the message from the AOC out when there are court orders affecting courthouses and the state overall in the state. And so we focused on that, and Jennifer's been kind of always ready to get an e-blast prepared to send out to the lawyers, and we've been getting the messages out on social media. So I think that's really been our focus during all of this, is to use our audience to make sure that we can inform the lawyers about what's going on in the judicial system. And there are some examples of that in your materials. We've also used our e-blast system to send out some messages from Colin, whether regarding COVID or after the George Floyd death and protests. The Colin's message that was sent out was very well received in both cases. We've sent out some ethics guidance to how to, have professional responsibility in a pandemic that Brian wrote, which was also well received. And there was a lot of people really loved the line that said lawyers are allowed to be nice, and I think that was well received. And so mostly our efforts in the realm of communication has been getting information out about COVID, and then making sure that the statements from the bar get out as they need to using eBlast. And we have sent probably more eBlasts in this past quarter than we've sent all of last year, just getting information out from Chief Justice Beasley or the court system.
And have we been the primary sort of mouthpiece for the Chief Justice's initiatives and mandates and directives?
They send out direct information on social media and on their website. They have a very good COVID website that has all of their information. But as it relates to getting the message directly to lawyers, we have been we've been that method, the way to get things to lawyers. Yeah.
Okay. Do you all feel, you all being the committee members, that there has been a sufficient or too much or too few number of e-blasts? We all get inundated with messages, but I feel like the bar has done a really good job of balancing necessary communications without, overloading us. Does anyone see it differently? No? No. Okay, good.
Tom, you had your hand up for a second. Do you have a comment?
It was just about the fact that the AOC puts out, the Chief Justices as well as AOC puts out their own COVID updates. So it's getting through to state attorneys as well. So it's a little redundancy for some of us that are getting it from both sides, but there's nothing wrong with that under the circumstances.
Great. Well, for everyone who helped contributed to those, I think that they were well done. And Colin in particular, I really thought your words were powerful. All right, so
Heidi, real quick, Andrea has her hand up.
Well, I just wanted to say the issue of eBlast came up briefly in our publications committee meeting the other day, where we were discussing, I think Alice might have mentioned it, that there was this concern about having too much, like where it gets diluted if we keep using it for too many things. And after having thought about it, I think I'm more in the camp of having it be such that we have less e-blasts and save it for things that we really want to focus on. Otherwise, I think it will get diluted with everything else we get. Because I think the Bar Association does a lot of it to the point where I don't even read it anymore.
I agree. I was just getting ready to use that sort of as an example of feeling like I hear too much, and therefore it's like the boy that cried wolf. I'm missing the important messages. So, all right, well, good feedback. And so as far as the third quarter goes, and looking ahead even sort of to the fourth quarter, we've talked about the podcast and some of the goals there. What else is in the pipeline as far as a plan for the communications, Brian?
So this was, I guess we were looking at what's coming up, what can we talk about? And of course, we just had a long conversation about possible podcast ideas, but I think there's another opportunity that's presenting itself here. And really it's through what we're doing right now. We are meeting virtually, but there are a lot of other meetings like this that are going on with different organizations. And so one of the thoughts that we had was, just kind of looking at what the bar is about to undertake. And that is a study, a discussion about whether we're talking about an amendment to the preamble regarding the adoption of anti-discrimination language, a study of whether the bar should adopt something similar to Model Rule 8.4G, which declares that it is professional misconduct to engage in any type of discriminatory behavior, as well as just other proposals that are on the table. This is something that is going to be only better with more participation and with more people being aware of what the bar is doing here. And so we thought that this might be a good opportunity to have folks, particularly counselors and committee members, reach out to or identify certain meetings that are occurring across the state with different organizations, and perhaps try to get the word out that that the bar is engaging in these discussions. Just to even just provide a quick informational piece, even if it's reaching out to a particular organization that you know your district bar is meeting for a lunchtime seminar, or there's another professional association that you are a part of. And if you could request 5 minutes as the counselor for your district, and if you wanted to have, you know, myself or Peter join with you, or somebody from the state bar staff to join with you in that meeting, just to kind of give folks a quick little heads up of what's going on, that the bar is looking at these different proposals, and they're important to the profession. And we will at some point be publishing things, most likely, and we would like feedback, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, things of that nature. But just encouraging kind of that knowledge of what's going on as well as participation. And it seems like this new way that we are meeting, as many, you know, kind of negatives that it feels of just not being able to be on the same room with each other, it does enable us to potentially attend a 6 o'clock meeting in Greensboro that we otherwise could not attend. And so that's where, you know, we kind of wanted to throw out this idea that, yes, the bar is going to be engaging those different ethics proposals. We are currently engaged in a different type of study that Mark is chairing the committee for, looking at regulatory change that's going on across the country, and to let folks know that the bar is doing these different things, that we could potentially reach out to these different organizations, maybe steal just a couple minutes of their agenda time to be there, to, as a part of Heidi, your overall thought of humanizing the bar, to be some people from the bar that can sit there, speak to folks, just tell them what we're doing, and know that if they have questions, there's a face with the name that they would be emailing or calling.
Right. So we're sort of asking you as sort of a call to action to see if you all would, you know, if there are any such groups or organizations that you're aware of in your communities, see if you might be able to engage with them and get 5 minutes on their agenda. And we will support you in that. Is there any specific sort of rollout plan at all, Brian, on future sort of COVID communications, or is it just as needed?
It is, I guess it's mostly as needed, as something comes out, whether it's from the Chief Justice or if there's something specific that the bar needs to address. I know just yesterday I was talking with Alice about potentially drafting another article on professional responsibility questions that we've been receiving. You know, ethics has been fielding a lot of just different calls and different inquiries that we normally do not tackle, and really that the rules weren't drafted to address. I don't think a pandemic was in mind when they drafted the rules of professional conduct. So but there are other issues that seem to be coming up a lot more, and so that will probably result in additional article that we'll put out there. But for the most part, we will be responding as needed. We certainly think, you know, in light of the governor's declaration yesterday that phase 2 is going to continue on. I'm not sure how that's going to affect the courts, but I imagine that there will be some sort of directive from the Chief Justice, and we'll be ready to respond and to assist in getting that word out as needed.
Have you all gotten a lot of inquiries about dues?
No, we have not a lot. We've sent out an e-blast to in June to lawyers who still hadn't paid, and reminded them of the new deadlines, and we're going to have to do that again here in July and August to make sure that people know that September 1st is the deadline for the late fee. And so we're going to be doing that communication out, but targeted, not necessarily to every lawyer, but just to those who haven't paid. And we've been doing that with CLE invoices and CLE fees as well. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. Along the lines of what Brian said about the outreach for the ethics stuff, there is some opportunity as well to have a virtual town hall with ethics council, with ethics chair and officers, where we could spend 10 minutes presenting what's going on and let anybody join and ask questions. All of that is a lot easier to do now than it was having to set that stuff up in person. And so I think we'll keep all those options on the table as it relates to just outreach after the July meeting to inform people, what's happening.
I want to know how Peter just volunteered me for being one of the primary sources for this town hall idea of his, but we're cool, Peter.
Kind of how we put that really good picture of you in the materials at first. Same thing. Okay. I think we're getting close here. And I know a couple of people have had to peel off, but does anyone else have any comments or suggestions or thoughts or ideas especially that might help me and Peter and Brian and Mark with the podcast that they'd like to share? No? All right.
Heidi, if I can add one quick thing, in terms of, yes, we were talking about the potential, whether it's town hall or reaching out to these organizations, but I want to just emphasize that staff is able and we're ready to attend with you, not necessarily asking you to do this alone. And even the same goes for, and I'll just maybe volunteer myself and to some extent, Nicole, for CLEs. We have been doing CLEs during this time period. And I know a lot of folks are struggling to figure out where they can get that, but I guess the bar is still here. And I think that's something that perhaps the committee members can really take back to their districts and the different circles that they communicate with. The bar is still functioning. And we are, here to assist in protecting the public, but however we can, assist lawyers in maintaining those standards, even if it's just something like CLE or getting everybody involved in the discussion, we are absolutely willing to participate in that. So, please continue to utilize us.
And we've been on meetings for these organizations over this quarter just to provide updates. Brian did one. I know I did one for the advocates where it was just one of their lunch webinars where you just go in and update on what's going on with the state bar and answer any questions. And so we're willing to do that anytime, pop on any meetings, whether it's about the ethics rules specifically or just anything. Talk about the bar. I think it's important for everyone to know that we're still kicking.
All right. All right. Anything else from anyone? No? Okay. All right. Well then, do we have a motion to adjourn? You might not even have to do that. I sometimes get my bar association and state bar rules mixed up. No? Okay. All right. Because you do have to do a motion with the bar association. All right. Well then, thank you all for contributing and for your ideas. George, are you waving bye or Mark's waving bye?
Yeah.
And that gets confusing. Okay. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And I will see hopefully all of you next week. Isn't there a big virtual meeting is it next Thursday?
Yes. We're going to have a grand old time with our little virtual meeting. So hope to see everybody then.
And actually, Heidi, just to encourage people to participate in that, two things are going to happen at that event. One is that the name of the new officer, the nominee, will be announced by the nominating committee. And the other thing is that Root Edmondson, who's retiring in August, will be celebrated, and there'll be a resolution of appreciation for him after 41 years at the state bar. So if you would encourage your fellow counselors to participate in that, it would be great. It would be nice to have a big crowd.
What time is it on Thursday?
It's Thursday at 5.
Okay. Well, maybe the new nominee could jump out from behind Jennifer's doors.
Yeah, it's going to be like, let's make a deal where you have different.
So we're going to keep the person in the waiting room.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the great reveal, we'll let them in.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, good. Well, I hope I see everyone there, if not before. Thank you and stay healthy, okay?
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Heidi. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody.